Hello everybody, welcome to Life on Mars. I'm Àlex, CEO and founder of MarsBased, and in this episode we bring you Job van der Voort, the CEO and co-founder of Remote, a company facilitating hiring talent worldwide, despite all the barriers, despite all the international and local regulations and whatnot. And we discuss remote work. So it sounds funny, but it is the way it is. They actually have got a very cool name for a company, very cool domain for the website as well. So obviously it's easy to tell what they do. So, from the perspective of MarsBased, we are an all remote development agency. We've never had an office. So therefore we know a thing or two about remote, probably not as many as Job, because he's been spearheading this company that's over 1,000 employees right now. And previously he had been VP of product at Gitlab, another Dutch company. So we discuss a lot of things regarding remote. First off, we start with the get back to the office policy that a lot of companies like Tesla or Travel Perk in Barcelona or Google, Apple, and other big tech incumbents have done to their employees, recalling or the workforce to report back to their offices. And maybe, and that's something that I include as an observation in the conversation, maybe that helped them to justify the layoffs that we have seen also, right? Oh, you don't want to come back to the office. Maybe we have to get rid of you in the company. I don't know. That's a personal take. We discuss also asynchronous work because he seems to be very fond of async. And obviously, as a remote only company, we do a lot of that here. We discuss some of the tools we're using. He discusses some of the tools he's using, some of his approaches to scheduling meetings or running the company as a CEO, because obviously it's very easy for the, let's say, some layers of the company to do asynchronous work in a remote way. That is skipping or definitely not having meetings altogether. Preferring written form communication and thought through posts on Basecamp or whatever other platform of choice you've got. For instance, we use Linear and Craft for the documentation. Over synchronous meetings, that is video calls or phone calls or even in-person meetings in the office if you have an office, right? We also discuss how it is running this kind of company as a CEO, an open-hearted conversation from CEO to CEO as to how to convey certain expectations, how to manage people, how to give feedback. And that's interesting from the perspective of, we're both Europeans, definitely discuss a thing or two about Americans giving feedback and how we Europeans tend to be much more blunt, but also much more honest, I would say, about giving negative feedback and how to do it in a positive manner without giving the famous shit sandwiches. That and much more in this episode with Job van der Voort. So if I were you, I wouldn't miss it for anything in the world. So let's jump right into it. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Life on Mars, Job. How are you doing?
Doing well. Thank you for having me.
All the way from the Netherlands, I suppose.
Yeah, no, that's correct. Yeah.
Where exactly?
Close to Amsterdam. I live 20 minutes away from Amsterdam in a little village. There's not much here. Schools and houses and filled with families with kids like my own. And that's it. There's a whole lot of cycle lanes here, which is why I love living here.
What's the name of it? My sister used to live in Hilversum, so.
No, this is a little town above Amsterdam. Like it's really, really small. But it's really close. It's much closer to Amsterdam than Hilversum.
Okay. Well, one of the things I think that we could be discussing here, because everybody seems to have an opinion on this, but obviously we're going to be discussing remote work because of obvious reasons. Your company, my company, but there's one angle to it that I think that not a lot of people seem to agree upon, which is this call back to the office by the big tech, right? So yeah. Amazon, Google, Apple especially, Facebook has been kind of like on the fence, but also like saying, hey, you guys should report back to the office 1 or 2 days a week, something like that. Tesla was pretty adamant about like going back to the office, and then followed immediately thereafter by these massive layoffs. Like, do you think, like, my opinion is, or my observation is, do you think this has been an excuse to lay off people that they knew they had to get rid of, and you're not coming back to the office, like we should should lay off some of these people? What are your opinions on this whole process?
No, I don't know. I mean, these are American companies, right? So they can lay off people at will, essentially, and so they don't really have to face massive consequences for doing so. So I think these companies, they feel the pressure of the public markets, and they lay off people as much as they can. Essentially, they use any excuse to like lay off people that are earning too much money or otherwise are underperforming compared to the rest. I don't necessarily think that the return to the office is, again, like I think a lot of that is them feeling out of control and possibly even seeing like lower productivity. It's totally possible because these companies were not started as remote organization. They don't run that way. The people they hired did not apply to be in such a position, so they probably run poorly remotely, having switched. So I think both things are frustrating for the people that work there, either getting laid off or having to return to the office. I don't necessarily think one is an excuse for the other or used as such. I genuinely don't think large companies act nefariously. I think in the details they often act nefariously, but when it comes down to laying off tens of thousands of people, they have to be pretty blunt to be able to do that quickly.
You laid a pretty good point, which is you don't transition easily from being a remote friendly company to a remote company. And during the pandemic, we saw the process whereby a lot of companies had to adopt the remote overnight with no preparation, no training, no equipment. People here in Spain probably some of them, they didn't have like good Wi-Fi at home, right? They didn't have a laptop and they had to work from home, however. Yeah. And the thing is, we have been getting a lot of gigs that we turn down because they're stupid to me. It's like how do you teach companies to become 100% remote, right? And my opinion, and I want to hear yours because you're an expert on this field, is you don't become a remote company, especially not overnight, because the workforce that you had and the principles you have, the culture you have in place, were not taking remote in consideration when you create it, right? So had you been a remote first company, you wouldn't have hired these people, you wouldn't have used these tools, you wouldn't have had an office, etc., right? So for me, it's almost I don't know if it's 100% impossible, but it's virtually impossible to transition to being a remote company, and the other way around. So what's your opinion on this?
No, curious. I mean, the other way around, certainly not, because then everybody has to fly into the office.
Exactly, it's much more complicated.
Yeah, it's very expensive. No, I think it's possible, and I've seen it happening. The thing is that you have to make it, you have to make the office disappear, right? Because you can't fall back not in place and not in time. You can't fall back to the office because then you don't have a forcing function to improve the behaviors and to improve whatever is wrong with the current way of working, right? And so if you as an organization say, well, we're going from being office-based to being fully remote and we're closing the office and nobody can go there, then you are forced to figure out the problems that you're going to face, right? Like there's no alternative to it. And those problems might part be people, but I think in the most part it's processes, tools, and the way of working. And is that difficult? And will it be a long journey? Yeah, it's going to be really difficult, and especially really difficult if you don't bring anybody in from the outside, because everybody in your team is only used to doing things in a particular way in the office. And so you don't have the expertise either to figure out, well, how are we going to do this, right? And so, but having said that, that's not impossible. You can totally bring people in and then everybody will be highly motivated because, well, obviously it won't work and obviously you can't go back to the office. I think the real challenge lies in companies that try to do something that they might call hybrid or something where, there's some potential to go back to the office, because then people will forever be waiting either to return to the office or they'll be deferring whatever they might be doing to when they are in the office. And so that might mean that, we can discuss this when we're back in the office. It's much easier to do this when we're together. It's, we can have a Zoom meeting when nobody wants it. Let's just do it. That creates a lot of problems. But that said, I think there's a number of companies that very successfully went from being office-based to being remote or fully remote. But it is super difficult. That's true. But what I fundamentally don't believe is that it's a people thing. I think everybody can work remotely. I don't think everybody will enjoy it, but yeah.
Oh well.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think there's anything special about remote work. right? I think that in the end, when you do your work, you have to do work on your computer and you have to interact with your colleagues. In a remote setting, that doesn't change. Like the modality that you use might be slightly different. And the frequency at which you do one or the other thing, where you might write down something versus having a face-to-face call, might be different, but fundamentally it doesn't really change the work. I think some people might not like it as much as I don't like sitting in an office, but yeah, I think everybody could work remotely.
It is quite a blunt opinion. I think I agree partly to it. You touch on the angle of offices, but not so much on the angle of management, because I think the main friction with becoming an office-less or a remote company per se is with management, right? People who are not used to managing people remotely, they're very reluctant to doing that because they are not used, they will not be seeing them. And I don't know if you get this, and I don't know your past experience in like, I mean, I know some of your past experience, but I don't know if you had endured the consulting years that some of us have done. I was at Deloitte, right? And people were always asking like, oh, if you're not at the office, how can I know that you're working, right?
Yeah.
And bullshit like that. And so most people are reluctant to doing remote because of like, I will not be able to see my coworkers. So therefore, office, yeah, I totally buy that. But do you think you can recycle people who are like super against remote into people who can manage workforce remotely? I think that's pretty long ways to go.
I don't think it's easy, but I think it's totally possible. You have to fundamentally change the way that people think about what management means, right? You can't say to these people, I'll do the same thing, because what they will do is they will buy one of these pieces of software that allows you to spy on your employees and track like whether they have activity. And you see that a lot, right? Like I've seen TikTok videos of people like, oh, this is how I move my mouse so that I can go to the toilet calmly, like ridiculous things like that. But you can totally tell somebody, hey, management is not about seeing whether somebody is present or whether somebody is shouting loudly. It's about looking at somebody's output, and if it's under your expectation, to help them get to the level, and if it's above, to make sure that they can grow in their career. That's management. And I think you can explain that to somebody, but it might be difficult. But I wouldn't say that it's like a fundamental property of a human to not understand what good management is. These people have just not been taught to be good managers. They just fallen into or have gotten wrong examples of what it might be. And yeah, consulting is well known for being, I mean, I have many friends who are or were in consulting, and for sure it makes a difference if you appear on the Friday drinks or Thursday drinks. I hear that's a thing nowadays. That shouldn't be the case, of course. And you can teach people to not look at that when managing.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember when I was at Deloitte, everything was like, dress code, like super fixed schedules. They were super harsh on like how you behave, the long shifts and whatnot, and super inflexible in many, many things. And nowadays, because I have a very good relationship with them, even though I like trash them every now and then on the podcast, but I guess they don't listen to it. But the thing is, like, I go to their offices now and you see guys walking in like shorts and t-shirts and tattoos and piercings. I was like, what the fuck, dude? And you can tell that they are desperate now. Before, the developer was the commodity. Now the company is the commodity. So they are just like not hiring, and they have to loosen up their policies. That being said, that's something that probably you have observed because of the work you conduct remote. With regards to hiring, this transition to hiring remotely, what are other interesting trends that you have seen in the industry, like major changes or shifts regarding hiring policies, for instance?
Yeah, if to me it's the entire move from being office based to becoming a company that is independent of location and everything that comes with that, right? Like I think, and that is the main thing I look at. It's not just about hiring, it's about how you function as an organization. The word asynchronous is used a lot more than it used to be. The actively avoiding meetings is now a thing that I can say, and people understand that, oh yeah, that makes sense. You can actually function without not having meetings. and then of course truly distributed companies, right? It is a different thing. There's many companies that call themselves remote, but they still hire people exclusively in the same country, and that is also becoming a whole different thing. So it's all very much aligned with each other, but they certainly are different, and all of these are growing significantly.
Because one of the things that I noticed is that whereas when we were founded in 2014, we had the competitive edge when it came to hiring, that we were remote, right? And we could access talent that was in villages in Spain, like, because we only hire like 1, 2, 3 hours away with a plane, because we meet pretty often.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, we could hire people in northern Spain, southern Spain, like little towns that they didn't want to live in Barcelona or Madrid, right?
Yeah.
But on the pandemic, and what we found out is that most people that they thought they wanted remote 100% are fine with remote 2-3 days a week. So now we lost pretty much 95% of the remote talent pool because they are content with 2 or 3 days a week, which they can get at Google or Facebook or even fucking Deloitte, right?
Yeah.
So that's why last year we had to adopt async, because by doing asynchronous work, now we can be on the edge and like, okay, oh, it's a company with no meetings and no email and things like that. Now gives us the competitive advantage that we had in 2014. What is your definition of async, and how much do you adopt async into the company? Because for us, we want to get to 100%, but I don't think we can pass 80%. It's very, very fucking difficult.
Yeah, I mean, async just means that you don't have meetings, right? And that you don't rely on blocking interactions with your colleagues, as in like you have to have synchronous chats, synchronous calls to move forward with your work, and that your default way of behaving and doing your work is in a manner that doesn't require direct interaction or real-time interaction with your colleagues. And so in reality, what it means is that you write down what you do, right? If you're an engineer in particular, you make your commits and you write any documentation necessary for what you're doing, and that's primarily how you act. And you make sure that there's no processes, there's no ceremonies that require people to sync up. One of our engineers, a new engineer, asked me the other day, he's like, well, how did you do it? Because I have no meetings at all. And in my last company, this was earlier today, in my last company, I was in hours upon hours of meetings, and here I literally have no meetings. How did you start this? And I said, oh, well, you just didn't start doing those meetings. And that's fundamentally what it is. And I don't think you have to strive for like a particular maximum. I think you just have to continuously evaluate whether whatever meeting or thing you're doing is actually necessary. And I think there are a lot of meetings that are necessary, right? For example, I think it's important to connect with your colleagues once in a while. If that's in person or if it's in a video call, I think that's important, and it is worthwhile seeing each other at least, right? Like, and hearing each other. And some people need it more than others, and for those that need it, should definitely do it. But for like the core of your work, you shouldn't need to do that. And so most of our engineers, I think they have on average like 1 hour of meetings a week. That's like combined all the meetings that they have. And it's pretty good. But like somebody like I have a lot of external meetings like this one. And so for me, it's many hours a day. and there's no way that I could like actively reduce that without hurting the company.
Yeah. Okay. That's where I wanted to go. Obviously, for the production line of workforce or layers of workforce, it's easier for them, right? Also, our developers, maybe they have 1 meeting a week, something like that, or 1 per project, which is easy to manage, because at the very end, like, we're super async when it comes. I don't know. We're going to be talking about tools. I'm very interested in this, but we're using Linear for project management, for instance. We have adopted Craft for documentation. So these are like really, really cool tools that they weren't around back then. So maybe async was more difficult because, but we had other tools. We had Trello, we had GitHub back in the day, right? Yeah. But when it comes to the upper layers of management, like as you mentioned, leadership or even clients. Clients is very difficult. Even though we've got a couple of clients who are like, oh no, let's just not talk, just email. That's it. Async, perfect. I'm fucking fine with it. But most people will not accept it, right? People are like, oh no, I want to talk to you, I want to see you. So for me, the definition of async is like what you mentioned, is like by default, I don't resort to synchronous communication.
Yeah.
Instead, I'll try to suggest doing async, right? How do you, on average, how many meetings do you have like per week that are synchronous? But I think it's more like recurrent meetings. One-offs, I don't count them. Like
No, but
this, it's like,
almost all my
yeah,
meetings are
one-off.
one-offs. Yeah, because
Okay.
I have a lot of reports, and with them I have
Yeah.
one-on-ones, recurring
Yeah.
one-on-ones, but I do move them around and reschedule them, and so do they. And what we often do is, like, my CRO yesterday sent me a message like, "Oh, can we just do async today?" And that happens a lot. I several
Okay.
times a week.
Okay. But do you have like do you have a board in the company? I assume you have a board or?
The board of directors, yeah.
Yeah, board of directors. That's something that you probably don't do asynchronously, right? Or
No, it's
semi.
once a quarter, so
Yeah.
we'll survive. And it was pretty short. We do a 2.5 hour board meeting, so it's
Only 2.5 hours. Okay.
yeah. But I have a
No.
million meetings a week, but again, like, most of them are one-offs and or external facing. Internal ones, I still have quite a few, but it's
Mhm.
yeah, like 3 to 5 hours a week or so.
Okay, because like on the one hand, you've got the companies that have got like thousands of meetings a week, and we all know who these companies are. Pretty much 95% of them. And on the other side of the spectrum, you've got Duis, right? Amir from Duis, who famously like tweets like, "Hey, I've got only 3 meetings every week." It's
Yeah,
like, how is that even possible? Like,
that's
I
pretty
thought I had
good.
very few meetings, but like he's very, very fundamentalist when it comes to like, no, let's not do a meeting about this.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, no, I won't be able to make that. I still have a lot of things where, yeah, I'm meeting with partners or customers, etc., and I want to have those meetings, and I think they're valuable. So
Yeah, exactly. So, a couple of things here on being presential, because I think that I also find a lot of value. First is with clients, right? It's like black and white. Like there's a huge difference with your one. I assume you're also doing sales, even though you've got a team in
yep,
place, but some of like the key contracts you're managing yourself.
yep.
You know that sometimes you got to jump on a plane and got to be there and got to shake hands and got to go to long dinners with people and take 3-4 meetings in 2 days and before signing a contract, right? If you don't do that, probably you're perceived like he doesn't really want the deal and I'm going to go to another company, right? The
Yeah,
competition.
absolutely. Yeah.
So how do you manage this with clients, for instance? What is your strategy?
No, I just do whatever's necessary. Right, my attitude with running a business is you have to just do whatever is necessary to run the business. And I think there's things you can do that promote a better async-ish culture, right? So, for example, if you have a meeting with a customer or something, to share them in advance an agenda that they can also edit and that they can also take notes, and it's a pretty good trick that I use sometimes. But for the most part, I just do whatever the customer wants, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
whatever's comfortable for you, that is the mode that we're going to use. Luckily for remote, our customers all know how to work remotely, so
Yeah.
I never actually. I do get on the plane sometimes, but it's usually more of an event kind of thing rather than like, oh, closing this big contract or something. That basically never happens, and I think all our biggest deals and all our biggest partnerships, they were all done over Zoom and email. That's really it.
It's funny because so one of your competitors also is being mentioned extensively in this podcast just because it sounds like this other word, right? but,
Yeah.
but anyways, and the other part is team management, right? I mentioned that, for instance, we meet every quarter. We host the Martian days, in which we fly everybody to Barcelona for a couple of days. Company presentation, all hands, and spend a little bit of time together, laser tag and whatnot, and then the annual retreat and whatnot. And I think that this is the best time you can ever spend in a company. So by being remote the entire year, they all are super fired up when they have to come for 2 days to Barcelona. And
Yeah.
it's Barcelona. Like everybody loves coming to
Yeah.
Barcelona. But I think that the same with async. Just because you're never taking meetings, you're more available for where they are strictly necessary. What's your strategy for team management, in-person meetings, get-togethers, retreats, whatever you want to call it?
Yeah, we don't do an company-wide retreat. We did this at
Okay.
GitLab, and my experience was that
Yeah.
they became less valuable the larger the company. Remote has 1,000 employees, and so organizing something like this is one, really expensive and takes a really long time. But it's also not very inclusive, because I would say maybe 1/3 of our employees would be able to attend any given event at any given time in any given location.
Yeah.
Because a lot of them are, they have to fly 10 hours, or they have to get a visa, or they have little kids that they deal with. And those are all things that are very easy to deal with if you're fully remote, but very hard if it comes to getting to a particular place in the world. And so what we encourage people to do is to meet up with their own teams or whatever is necessary, right? If there is a particular project group, we do it with the executive team, for example. Every quarter we get together. And very similar to what you're saying is that everybody's really focused, really fired up. We use a lot of that time to do things you can only do in person, like go out for dinner, do fun things together. And then the actual work can happen online, just the same. But we don't do like a big company get together. We might do it sometime in the future, but as of yet, it's really costly in every possible manner, including like the time. And so I just worry about the fact that it's not very inclusive, and that we're always going to have a whole bunch of people not able to attend.
Yeah, I totally understand it, because like most of our employees are like a first or second or third time parents, and it's very, very complicated, and they're super pissed off when they have to miss one company retreat or one Mars meeting, because it's like, oh my god, like we only meet like 3-4 times a year. I cannot miss this. But obviously, I've just become a father or a mother. But you mentioned, like, look, one of the secret sauces of these podcasts is I think it's becoming popular because I ask questions that I know are useful because they're useful to me. And if they're useful to me, chances are going to be useful for somebody else. And the reason I'm going to be asking the next question is because I totally need the answer. Since you brought it up, is leadership retreats. We're going to do the first one this year at MarsBased, and we totally have got no clue about what to do or how to structure them. So I had heard of these meet your team strategies. I think, people at Gitlab have it, people at Basecamp have it. Like, they have different stipends to go meet their local teams, because like team size is very big, and would not make sense for them to look, you're in Chicago and the design team is in Chicago, just go meet them. Have you got, some money to go meet them? But leadership retreats, like, how do you approach them? Is it like 100% work? Is it not? Is it just some fun time together? Or like, how do you structure these kind of things?
Yeah, so why do we do them in the first place? We are in different time zones, and nobody wants to sit on hour-long Zoom calls. But sitting together in the same room for many hours is much easier, especially if that's interrupted by lunch and dinner, whatever. Yeah. And so we plan them. So ours are always 3 days of meetings, essentially 2.5 to 3 days of meetings. But we spend a lot of time at lunch, and we spend a lot of time at dinner, so that we have a lot of time, casual time, talking with each other about random things. And then we make sure we do 1 or 2 fun things, or like we have dinner in like a weird special place or something, or we go, there's a little paddle competition ongoing in the leadership team, so we go play paddle or something. But it's mostly pretty focused on getting shit done and just spending a lot of time together. And then on what are we working on, I think there's a combination of 2 things. One is it should be sort of like forward looking, like having long conversations. What is important? What isn't important? And part of it, doing things that otherwise you would never make time for, like reevaluating what are our values, what is important to us, how do we want to approach how we stand in a particular way as an organization. And that's it. And I think it works pretty well. But also, I would honestly admit that we've done it different every single time. And it's been good every single time. It's like we spent more time in meetings, we spent less time in meetings, we made it longer, made it shorter. It always worked out in a particular way. I think the main point and the most important thing that always happened was, 1, we spent a lot of time together, and 2, at the end of it, we were all facing in the same direction. So we all had like really clearly in mind, what is it that we're going to do as an organization coming out of this meeting? This is what we are going to achieve, and this is the big change that we're going to make. And I think the last 2 that we did, we made meaningful decisions. It's like, this is something very different than what we did before. We very much believe in it, and it is going to impact the future of the organization. And that feels very successful. And actually, we have the next one upcoming next month. I think this is one where we're like, well, we made all these decisions in the last meetings. Now it's more like, let's just keep doing it.
Just go
or like
surfing and fuck
evaluate
it.
whether those were the right decisions.
Where are you going?
So we usually go in somewhere in Europe. In
Yeah.
this case, we're going to Dublin. We did it in Lisbon several times. We did it in
Okay.
Algarve once. We did it in Amsterdam last time. So now I think now it's going to be Dublin.
Yeah. So you're going from progressively from really good weather to shitty weather to incredibly shitty weather, right? Because I think there's no worse weather than Dublin in Europe. It's but very good beer and
We
other things. Probably they
we
have
we're,
good
we're
food.
being pragmatic about it. It's like it's a combination of like, is it? I mean, it will be in the summer, so I'm like, it's too hot in Portugal. So
Yeah, exactly. Let's get some rain and extreme cold in Dublin. We did our second company retreat was in Dublin. Actually, it was middle of July and we had like 10 degrees Celsius and it was pouring down every day. It's like, how is that even possible? Like, we're not in the Arctic Pole. But anyways, yeah, I think I mean, if you really wanted to get more like shit done, that's a good location. If you want to have a more like relaxed and casual place to be, maybe Dublin. Could have chosen
we did
better.
it. Yeah, we did it in Algarve in Portugal once in like this
Yeah,
nice resort.
nice.
And
Yeah.
it was almost too nice because then you're in this like really nice place where everybody's like really relaxing and enjoying themselves and drinking and eating. And we're just there to have meetings in their like shitty meeting room because it's an amazing resort. They're not going to have a great meeting because who's going to have meetings there?
Exactly.
It was good in the end, but yeah, I don't know. It didn't feel like the right location to do these kind of things.
Look, one of the and it's good that we talk about like leadership meetings because I think one of the struggles of all remote companies is basically aligning incentives and long-term vision with your co-founders. And I've been pretty lucky because my two co-founders are my best friends since childhood, right? Since primary school, and so we're pretty well aligned. But somehow, sometimes our opinions diverge just because of the sheer nature of not meeting enough, which is like we don't live in the same city. And so sometimes like we don't meet in a month or 2 months, like we talk every week, but for the long-term vision, sometimes if we don't discuss that very often, these opinions diverge. However, every year we make the commitment of reevaluating everything and just putting it in like into paper and considering like long-term scenarios, short-term scenarios and all of that. And what how you call that, like life moments, like personal situations,
Yeah.
which a lot of people don't really put into place or into the equation. What's your strategy to keep your visions aligned with your leadership team?
Yeah, I mean, between my co-founder and I, we are always best friends, so we're just always talking. So there's zero
Awesome.
effort. We don't have to do anything about it because we're always talking. And this
Yeah,
this morning, after a workout, I was texting with him as we were always texting, and that's how we make a lot of decisions.
but I assume your leadership team is bigger than the two
Yeah,
co-founders, right?
thankfully it
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, with the rest of the leadership team, it's I think one is we're quite good at over communicating what we want to do, how we want to
Perfect.
do it. And then these offsites are a really great way to like really dig deeply around like what is the strategy, what do we believe in, and what is the direction we head in. And those two things together, one over communicating with that group, and the other one is just having these quarterly offsites. I think that's the right it's good enough, right? Like we don't need more often. And those offsites are intense and long. That does the work. I think that's sufficient. I think for the greater organization, it's a matter of over communicating it, right? Continuously talking about what is it that we're doing, why are we doing this, and especially if you're going to make a change about the direction that you're taking. But yeah, within leadership team is pretty easy. And we talk a lot, like over Slack, over text, over whatever else, but we talk a lot and we make sure to over communicate. And I think that solves a lot of issues. You don't have to overthink too much about when you're communicating.
Yeah, although over communication is it can be good, especially like in how you put it, like depending on the channel, right? Because if there's like some sort of like site like company wide documentation tool, like we're using Craft, right? I'm a huge fan of documentation, but I'm also the guy who gets like pretty annoyed at nobody ever refreshing or taking a look at documentation, not even reading it, but like keeping it alive and maintained, right? So at the very end, then it just becomes like a clusterfuck of really old documents, and it just creates more frustration than actually not having documentation, right? Because it's just outdated and it makes you look very bad. But I think it's probably something that I have to, I'm probably projecting here. Look, I wanted to ask you about, is there anything that you feel like as a CEO you're underperforming in? So my question being, I'm not very good at reevaluating things that we have decided in the past. Situation has changed maybe a year after. And I don't know, like I don't cope with the pressure of, oh, like my feeling is always like, oh no, I gotta do this because I totally decided this 18 months ago, even though it doesn't really make sense anymore, right? I'm underperforming as a CEO there. I know that's my flaw. What are yours? Open up a little bit here.
Yeah, I think there's a few. I think one, and I kind of feel like they're all aligned, because of how I am as a person. I'm not very good at giving positive feedback because I don't do it habitually because I live
You're
very much
Dutch.
in the future. Yeah, no, because I'm Dutch. Yeah, you can say I don't even, it doesn't even feel like an insult. So I'm not very good at that. And so I try to remind myself, and I actively try to do it, but it still doesn't really come naturally to me. And so sometimes people ask me like, how am I doing? Can you give me any feedback? And I'm like, yeah, I didn't say anything. It's good, doing well. If you were not
Yeah.
doing well, I would have told you.
No news, good news, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah. And but it's important, and I realize it's important. It's just it doesn't come natural to me. And the other one is, and it's very similar, is like I don't celebrate anything. I don't celebrate any wins or any achievements, or I never really feel satisfaction either, or like particular achievement. I think for me, satisfaction from my work comes from the challenge that it has. And so whenever I achieve something, I already think about whatever is next. And so that's a pretty good attitude to have if you're running a company, because it's going to help you always push further. But it's not very helpful to the rest of your team when you're always like, oh, we just shipped this giant new thing. And I'm like, yeah, okay, but now we have to do the next thing. And so I'm not very good at that. I think in other things, I'm pretty good, but like I'm really bad at those kind of things. Yeah, I think that's it. I don't really shut up about things that annoy me. As in, like, I'm not unreasonable, or I'm not, on the average. I think I'm pretty kind person, but if something annoys me, or if I feel like very strongly about something, I will not let it go. And it can be good and it can be annoying, right? Some things are very difficult to solve, and yeah, I will not forget about them. Again, like I think it also helps in some ways.
I totally get the thing about not celebrating. Probably comes because I totally, this is the first time we talk, right? But I feel like I know you a little bit because I've been following you on Twitter for so many years. Maybe it's a personality trait that we have in common, is that we don't celebrate because we know that these, like shipping something or achieving like a reward, something like that, or an award, is like, it's not the ultimate goal. It's just part of the way. Whereas for a team, maybe it is a goal because it's their project, right? And so, yeah, I have had to kind of like lower my standards, open up a little bit more, or give in to being more open about this, and just, okay, let's celebrate a little bit certain things, because they might be meaningless and inconsequential to me, but they are very meaningful for them, right?
Yeah.
They get paid obviously in money and perks and rewards and all of that, but also in recognition, because I also experienced when I was a developer at other jobs, we didn't get any recognition. And sometimes, a pat in the back doesn't replace salaries or, upgrades in your title, but it does feel very well. However, one point that you raised here, and I think it's very important, I want to know, because I think sometimes we're too good to our people, and it seems that you're the other way around. Like you have more like blunt opinions, and you have like, as you said, like you're very vocal about things that annoy you, that you particularly don't like. We don't do that. And I think like it can be good for some things. It's bad for other things, because then people are not used to taking bad feedback. So how does this not conflict with people maybe feeling a little bit, uncomfortable around this kind of feedback, especially in async environments? Written form can be pretty passive aggressive as well. How do you overcome these situations?
Yeah, we have our company values, and the first one is kindness. So I think you can be both direct and clear and still be kind to somebody.
Okay.
Right. I think a really important one is that if I'm annoyed about something, it's never really somebody's behavior. And if it is, I would tell them in private and calmly so, but it's usually directed at whatever the problem is that we want to solve, right? Or whatever the fault is. And I very much try to take an attitude of, well, if something is wrong with our product, for example, or if there's something went wrong in helping a customer, that's our fault and ultimately mine, right? Like, how have we failed as a company? How did our processes break, and not who fucked up, right? And I think that is the right attitude when it comes to these kind of things. I think you should always be kind to people. There's never a reason. I mean, even giving very direct feedback about, to somebody about how they perform, you can do that in a kind way, even if it's really negative, right? Like, this is, doesn't match my expectations. I don't think you're not being, the point is not being nice. The point is being kind and being fair to somebody. And as long as you present those things in a light where it's like, well, look, this is what we've agreed upon. You have not done this. These are the consequences, or this is how I'm going to help you get better. You achieve the same result, or probably even better. You transmitted the message, but you don't necessarily make somebody feel like shit. I mean, it always sucks to get negative feedback, but better than being an ass. And I mean, that's basically my philosophy of running remote. It's like, you can be really ambitious, do really hard things, and work really hard and be very direct with each other without being an asshole to each other.
Okay, so that's the ultimate question. So how do you give direct and blunt and negative feedback without giving shit sandwiches?
I mean, you don't have to
secret sauce.
Yeah, no, the secret sauce is just being clear, right? Like, if let's say that you didn't
give me an example.
Yeah, you really underdelivered whatever you were working on. Then instead of being an ass to you, or without giving you a shit sandwich, I can just say, hey, listen, Àlex, I don't think that this quality of work represents of what we want to get to. Because of X, Y, and Z, this is how I think about this. I think that we agreed that the work would be different, or that it would be better than what it is now, and I'm unhappy with it, and I want to work on getting it to a place where it is better. So let's make a plan. That's how you can say you did a shitty job. Like, how we're gonna move forward. And I think that is completely fair, because I didn't say to you that you're a bad person. Didn't say anything about you as a person. Yeah. I was not rude to you, but I also didn't try to mask whatever I was trying to transmit, right? I was really clear. Like, this is something wrong, and this is why. It's not about you, it's about the work that you do. And I think that's a big fundamental difference between giving feedback well and not very well.
Okay, we're running out of time. A couple of quick questions to wrap this up. The first one is kind of like the signature question of this podcast, is what has been your biggest and most expensive fuck up in the company? And if you can quantify it in money.
Oh, I don't know.
As a CEO, you probably have a few.
Yeah, a lot.
It's your first company, right?
No? Yeah. First one that made more than like $10,000.
Perfect. Yeah.
I mean, there's been a million. I think the biggest fuck ups we made was that we forgot to charge something through to customers. So we processed a lot of payroll and benefits to us.
Something that you did personally, not your team.
I know. I mean, I'm responsible for all of these things. So I don't know. I'm responsible for all these things, and that's probably the biggest one, which is probably in the millions, where we ended up paying for things that we should have charged our customers for, and of course we couldn't do that. So, but the things that I did personally, yeah, I mean, I signed off on all these things. It's all in the end, is all of it. I did, but there's not like I did something really stupid and we couldn't recover it. No, but there's been a bunch of projects that I started that resulted in nothing, and those projects have costed us probably millions. If you want,
like, like I don't know about you, and you probably, like, with 1,000 employees, you probably got too many things to sign on. So have you ever signed on something that you haven't read?
I sign like 200 documents a day.
Jesus Christ.
So I have a team.
you don't read
whether
that,
I can sign something. I sign documents in languages that I can't read because they're not, in Arabic.
In your alphabet. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so. I would totally pay like 20,000 euros a month for like kind of like a chat GPT, but for legal stuff.
Oh,
Like,
can you just use ChatGPT for it?
I mean, you can and you cannot, because like most of the time just makes up like really stupid bullshit. And then like I don't know. I totally like, the more I use it, the less I trust it,
Mm.
because it's just like that 1%, that 10% that it's completely made up is like, I cannot trust it with a contract, for instance. Like I will never trust it with a contract. So I don't know. It's still too early. Good. Last question. I totally roll the carpet for you. In 1 minute, how can we help you back? Like totally repaying this favor.
Okay, help me back. Send more people to remote.com. That's the only thing, right? Like the way I think about my impact in the world and that of my company of remote is that what I want is I want to create a world in which, independent of who you are and where you live, you're able to build wealth for yourself. And I think one of the primary ways that we can do that is by giving people access to more opportunities. And so we make it very easy for employers to hire anybody anywhere. And over time, we'll make it more easy for individuals to find those opportunities as well. And so the more people that follow us, that look into us, the more companies that reach out to us to help them hire people anywhere and pay them anywhere, the better. That's the only thing I really want.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you, Val.
Thanks so much for having me.